So we're going to get into some further instances of conflict at different points now. So we'll talk now about during mating. So now we're getting into competition and conflict over fertilization rather than mating itself. And we're into the arena of sperm competition and cryptic female choice. And so we're dealing really with traits to do with reproductive tracts and genitals here. One of the best studied examples of this is in waterfowl. Waterfowl are the only group of birds that have a penis. So birds typically have just a cloaca where they would just press them together, and that's how fertilization is achieved. But waterfowl, ducks, are some of the only birds that have polygynous mating systems. In polygynous mating systems, as you'll remember, males stand to gain more from mating because they can have multiple females. So there's more at stake for a male, and a male stands to lose more by not successfully fertilizing eggs. So males have evolved all sorts of tactics for, forcing themselves on females. And one physiological way they do this is to have a kind of an eversible penis. This is an Argentinian lake duck which has got a 40 centimetre long penis, which is longer than the length of its body, and it can explosively evert it. Here's a video of that happening. And so that's a kind of a forceful tactic that the male uses to basically implant, it's really understandable in the context of the female's reproductive tract, which has co-evolved with these weird kind of corkscrew-shaped penises. And there is extensive kind of co-evolution of male and female genitalia in this clade of birds. So Brennan et al. Studied across different waterfowl species, studied the elaboration of the female reproductive tract and the male genitals, and they found that so males tend to have a corkscrew-shaped penis of different lengths, and the female reproductive tract is also corkscrew-shaped in the opposite direction, which kind of is an adaptation to try to be able to exclude the male from the reproductive tract, and it's surrounded by muscles that can contract and kind of force anything out. It's got blind endings and alleys to kind of confuse the penis of the male, and what they found was that the degree of elaboration in the female vagina is correlated with the length of the male's penis. So it's a way, it's interpreted as an adaptation by the female to be able to resist such attempts by the male. So across the whole waterfowl clade, you get this co-evolution of genital morphology. Another way that males have to take back control of fertilization, we'll get into right now, and it happens in bed bugs. So I don't know whether you've read anything about bedbug mating, but if not, this is going to be interesting. So the start of the story is back in the 19th century when researchers discovered that female bedbugs have this weird kind of soft bit organ somewhere on their stomachs, somewhere on their bottom of their abdomen, and they called them a spermaleague because for some reason they kept finding sperm in it. And they had no idea what it was. And it took decades before people actually observed what happened. And it turns out that bedbugs engage in something called traumatic insemination. And traumatic insemination is where the male's penis is shaped like a spike, like a hypodermic syringe. And what he does is he pierces the skin of the female and then mates with the hole that he's created. he will then inject his sperm into the body cavity instead of into the reproductive tract. So then the sperm will then swim through the body cavity, through the fluid of the female, and migrate to the ovaries and do their fertilization like that. So what does that have to do with the spermaleague? Well, the spermaleague is a counter-adaptation. It's called, they call it a paragenital system, where the female has provided an alternative means of copulation so that the male doesn't inflict too much harm on them. Obviously it's harmful to females to have their cuticle pierced and to have this traumatic insemination happen. So the female has evolved a spermaleague, which is a kind of an alternative route for the male to get in by. And they have, the males then find it easier to do that by mating with the spermaleague instead of trying to pierce a hard cuticle. So this paper here, Tatarnic et al., goes into this in great detail. The idea is that traumatic insemination in the first place is an adaptation to circumvent all of those measures that females have to control access to fertilization. So the female waterfowls have these great convoluted reproductive tracts to allow them to keep out a male. Well, in the bedbugs, what's happened is that the same thing has happened in females, but the males have decided to completely circumvent all of that and go in through the body cavity instead, taking back control of fertilization. And the spermaleague is the beginning of a female's adaptation to reduce the harm of that to the females. So this Morrow and Arnquist paper goes into the functions of spermaleagues and how they established that. Turns out that lots and lots of this particular family of bugs, these are the Chimicomorpha bugs, and for some weird reason, they often go for this traumatic insemination method of mating. We don't quite know why, but in Coridromius, which is part of the same superfamily, females have these entire, not just a spermaleague, but an entire set of vessels and an entire secondary genital system which males use instead of their primary reproductive tract as a kind of an end point of this kind of evolution to make it easier for traumatic insemination to happen. Not only that, but male bedbugs are so eager they're kind of pumped up and full of hormones and will mate with anything, whether or not it's a male or a female. And there's been historically such a high risk, even to males, of being jumped by another male and stabbed, that the males have evolved their own spermaleagues. So males carry an adaptation to make it easier for other males to mate with them traumatically and reduce the cost of being stabbed, because they have a significant evolutionary risk of being traumatically mated with. It's just a bizarre system. Traumatic insemination happens in a bunch of other taxa. It's just particularly common in insects and mollusks for some reason. It happens in bed bugs, it happens in bat bugs, which are very related to bed bugs. It happens in weird strepsipterans, which live inside the abdomens of wasps. It happens in spiders quite a lot. It happens a lot in mollusks. Mollusks tend to be hermaphrodites, and so each partner can play the male or the female role. The male is the one that does the stabbing, and the female is the one that tends to get stabbed. So in hermaphrodites, nobody, evolutionarily speaking, it's more advantageous to play the male role here. So you get these fighting amongst two hermaphrodites, where they will kind of fence with their penises in order to try and stab the other one, because each one is trying to be the male in the interaction. It's just a weird world of the kind of the results of this sexual conflict.